now under ordinances and action items on our agenda. There are no second readings of ordinances or public hearings. Item number 16 is consideration of adoption of a resolution approving the addition of a suicide prevention policy. And the recommended action relates to resolution 21-089 regarding the same. And so I believe that Interim City Manager Larson, you wanted to cover this item on staff. Is that correct?
I'll introduce the item, Mayor. Thank you very much. And I mostly wanted to explain how this item came before council because it was not part of your adopted work program. As the council is aware, I meet monthly with the other city managers of Santa Clara County. And at one of our recent meetings, we had a presentation by a representative of the county who you'll hear from tonight on an effort to have cities throughout Santa Clara County consider adopting a suicide prevention policy. So I brought that back here, and after talking with two council members, the mayor and another council member, I recommended it be added to the agenda for your consideration, given that the workload to bring it forward to you was de minimis and that we had models from other cities to draw upon, that it was timely given that this was Suicide Prevention Month, and three, that the work that's planned ahead can be folded into the ongoing efforts of the city in terms of facility public safety response and employee training and onboarding. So it seemed to dovetail well with other work of the city and not be an extraordinary amount of work to bring it forward to you for consideration or for implementation thereafter. I would like to turn it over to Deputy City Manager Katie Nomura to present the staff report. Katie?
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Interim City Manager Larson. And, you know, I think it's safe to say, you know, there should be a good amount of community and I would guess council support on this. And so, you know, we're slightly behind our schedule. If Katie, you wanted to streamline the report, I think that would be well received. And so thanks very much, and take it away, Katie.
Understood. I'm actually going to hand it off to Astrid Robles, our management analyst, and she will definitely streamline the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome, Astrid.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My name is Astrid Robles, Management Analyst, and I'm here to present on a policy on suicide prevention. Santa Clara County adopted a suicide prevention strategic plan in 2010. The issue of suicide was brought to the forefront of community's attention in 2009 when 4 adolescents died by suicide in a less than 6 months period. In support of this plan, 8 other cities listed here on the slide have adopted suicide prevention policies similar to the one you're considering this evening. The county produces an annual report to measure the effectiveness of the plan. Here's a snapshot from the most recent annual report, which shows the suicide rates from all of the cities in Santa Clara County. The report shows that in 2018, Cupertino had a suicide rate of 0 per 100,000 residents. The City Council is committed to supporting mental health, as seen through the mental health support item in the council-approved city work program, as well as in the city's 2021 legislative platform, where it states that the city supports state and federal legislation that provides services to those experiencing mental health challenges. The proposed policy states that current employees will receive information to help gain a better understanding of the causes of suicide and suicide prevention annually. The city will work with the county to ensure that information shared reflects current research and to offer training to staff. The city is developing public safety protocols in the case of a suicide attempt at city facilities and will ensure that these protocols are reviewed annually. The city is also working to establish a communication strategy in the case of an incident at a city facility. The city will also provide information to residents on suicide prevention. Residents can currently find resources available at cupertino.org/mental health. The city will also work with the county to provide relevant information on suicide prevention to help educate the community. The proposed policy also includes an annual recognition of Suicide Prevention Month in the month of September, such as through the proclamation, similar to the one council presented earlier this evening. And that concludes my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Astrid. Let us go to members of the public before we bring it back to council. And I see Victor I apologize, Ojakian, followed by Mary Gloner, followed by David Mineta. Welcome, Victor.
In the end, you got my name pretty close to right, so I'm grateful for that. I'm the person who made the presentation to the City Managers Association a few weeks ago with the objective that because we already have many cities that have a suicide prevention policy, and if people don't know, every school district in Santa Clara County has a suicide prevention policy. So our goal is to get all the cities like we have all the school districts. So as you probably learned earlier from the proclamation, suicide prevention work in Santa Clara County has become a mainstream activity. It's not some aberrant thing that a few people are working on. We have a good suicide prevention plan. Some have called it the platinum plan of the handful of other counties that have plans. And we've got a very robust suicide prevention program, which is led by Mago, who you heard earlier. So we believe that suicide prevention is preventable, that addressing suicide is not out of the ordinary or unusual, and that policy and governance work is important and very useful. And we want to see all cities have this plan. We think one of the barriers that's involved in suicide prevention is stigma. And so promoting awareness is critical, and local effort is key in doing some of that. And so that's why we're asking you and others to adopt a policy. If Cupertino approves this policy tonight, we will have, of the cities that have a policy, they have 86% of the residents in Santa Clara County. So again, we're not asking you to do something that's out of the ordinary or unusual. Frankly, what we're saying is we're all responsible and we need an all hands on deck approach. So I hope, before I finish, thank this interim city manager and the staff for working on this and bringing it forward. And I hope you approve it tonight.
Thanks so much, Victor. Our next speaker is Mary Gloner. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Mayor Paul and council members for your time. I especially want to thank the City Manager's Office staff for elevating this resolution. My name is Mary Gloner. I'm the CEO of Project Safety Net. It's a community coalition dedicated to youth well-being and suicide prevention based in Palo Alto, which was launched by the City of Palo Alto in partnership with the Palo Alto Unified School District, Stanford Children's Healthcare, and nearly 50 community partners, including one of our founding members, Vic Ojakian. And Project Safety Net is also a member of the County Suicide Prevention Oversight Committee. I speak today asking council support to adopt this policy, not only as a community health professional, but as a member of the Asian Pacific Islander community, especially as a child of Filipino immigrants who came to the U.S. nearly 60 years ago to live the American dream, including being employed by Cupertino companies and having witnessed firsthand the mental health challenges and the impact of suicide on my family. And as Mayor Golian shared earlier, suicide is a preventable public health issue that requires community-wide response, including government leading the way. The City of Palo Alto adopted a suicide prevention policy after the community experienced youth suicide over a decade ago. The policy did three things for its city, which I believe will do the same for Cupertino. First, it informed the city's programming initiatives, especially its youth programs and public safety activities. Secondly, it helped community organizations secure additional resources to support prevention work, especially working with the county's behavioral health division. And thirdly, it fostered a heightened awareness and understanding of suicide prevention, which is key to our community-wide collaborative efforts. And I respectfully request that you unanimously adopt a suicide prevention policy for Cupertino, and Project Safety Net is available to serve as a resource to your community in its implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Our next and final speaker is David Mineta. Welcome, David.
Good evening, Mayor Paul. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Good evening, City Council and City Administration. I would like to thank Interim City Manager Greg Larson for bringing this to the City Council. A few years ago, Greg was, I think we're related by occupation. And I just want to thank Greg. And a few years ago, Greg worked for my father in a different era. My father's Norman Mineta, and former city councilman, vice mayor, mayor of San Jose, congressman, and two-time cabinet secretary. And I think he has Greg to thank for all that success. So, but again, I am the CEO of Momentum for Health. I am here with my colleagues, Vic Ojakian and Mary Gloner, to stand in support of this policy, the suicide prevention policy being considered by the council tonight. This past week, I had the great honor of being a panelist on a panel moderated by Councilmember Way and on mental health in the AAPI community. My first data point that I'd like to share tonight, I shared that night as well. According to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. When broken down by race, suicide is the first leading cause of death among Asian American young adults aged 15 to 24. This is true of no other racial group in this age range in America. Unfortunately, for other demographic groups, there are not necessarily quite as stark as that, but the impact of suicide in other demographic groups is significant. So this is a whole of community effort between government levels, schools, faith community, civic groups, and neighborhoods. So by not only passing this policy tonight, but more importantly, implementing it with intention will save lives and suffering. And again, I want to thank you for the council's consideration tonight and also for the proclamation that was passed earlier. Momentum for Health, as the largest behavioral health agency serving adults in Santa Clara County, joins with Mago and her colleagues in the county to offer any assistance to Cupertino moving forward. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, David. All right, let's bring it back up to council. I'd like to ask for a motion for the staff recommended approval of the resolution. Vice Mayor Chow, followed by Councilmember Way.
Okay, so I'll move to adopt resolution number 21-089, establishing a suicide prevention policy.
Very good. Councilmember Way, are you?
I'll second that.
Very good. Okay, so I see your hands are still raised, or at least Vice Mayor Chow's still is. Did you want to speak to your motion, followed by Councilmember Way, and then Councilmember?
Yeah, sure. So, frankly, at first, this caught me by surprise because this item was not on our work program exactly, even though we have an item on mental health. And I understand we have a really full plate this year. But then I looked it up. I find out the strategic plan was approved in 2010. So this policy is long overdue. No, I actually am glad that Greg brought it forward. And given that he thinks that the staff has that bandwidth to handle, I think that now I'm glad that this is done. Actually, I find out California state actually has has a new suicide prevention strategic plan for 2020 to 2025. And I feel this policy kind of scratched the surface, and there's a lot more we could do. But then this year we probably don't have time, but I think this is something we should continue to study more. I wish there was more time to study, to learn more about what's the status after 10 years of implementation in Santa Clara County and what's their plan for the next 10 years. And but I know that we don't have that much time this year.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Chow. Next, we have Councilmember Way.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. Actually, I want here to thank Mayor Paul for being considerate to my feelings. I think interim city manager Greg said he consulted with another council member, which is me. This one is real dear to my heart. I think all my friends and a lot of people know, maybe some members don't know, that my daughter Diana committed suicide March 6, 2004 in New York City. And, you know, it is a devastating thing for my families. But ever since that, I have done everything within what I can do to support teenagers on mental health issues. I hosted from 2006 to 2018 the Verdadero at Monte Vista High School to meet with high school kids to listen to them. And then I want to thank Vice Mayor Chow because her YAPA group invited me to be the mental health group study advisor every year. This is the third year I'm mentoring kids. So this is really dear to my heart. And Mayor Paul, if you remember, you asked us on the city work plan, you know, every council member proposed something. The one thing I proposed was our mental health, you know, some activities in the city to work on the mental health issues. Suicide is preventable. The one thing I would like to let everyone know is my daughter actually had symptoms of committing suicide. And, you know, it's all there, but we were not aware of it. And my friends were not aware of it. We knew something was not quite right, but we didn't know how to pinpoint it. So the first thing to prevent suicide is awareness. It's education and awareness. So I am very happy that this is on our city work plan and also on our agenda. And I think we can really, really work something to bring this to our community. Suicide is preventable. So on the September 16th, on the Mental Health Forum, where David Manetta mentioned, he was one of our panelists. This is a way to spread awareness. And I recently has encounter with Community Health Awareness Council called CHAC. They are working with CUSD, Cupertino Union School District, to establish a family resource center at Lincoln Elementary School. So I'm working closely with them. This is something that's to bring to our community, not just suicide awareness, but also mental health awareness. So I want to thank interim city Manager Greg to bring this up, and I want to thank Mayor Paul to be sensitive to my feelings. And I want to repeat, this is dear to my heart, and I'm 100% on board. And I think our city can really work to benefit not just our teens, our adults too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Way, and I commend you for your courage and your willingness to go through a very, very difficult episode in life and turn it into something very positive for our community. But that's greatly appreciated. Councilmember Willie.
Yeah, just want to thank you, Councilman Way, for, like Mayor Paul said, for your courage. You know, to save a life, you can't put a number on it, a value on it. And so anything that we can do to help those who need help, I think it should be at the top of our priority list. Thank you to the speakers that spoke up, especially David Manetta. I mean, his championing the cause with his group. Obviously, this has been going on quite a while, and so there's been a lot of effort that's been put into it by a lot of people. And so, wow, is there anything I can really suggest, well, I do have one thought. I mean, I'll toss it out. Maybe it's already been thought about, or maybe there's already a place for people in need to call without having to think, without having to go to the internet or something. You know, we have 911 for an emergency. I would toss out that a special number that was used could be used, you know, across the US, maybe across the world. And it could be as simple as 1-to-1. 1-to-1. You need help? 1-to-1. So I'll just toss that out, but I fully support that we're going to have our city working on this, and we may never see the results, but we can believe it'll have results. So thank you, everyone. Yep, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councilmember Willie. And I see hands raised. Let me go to Councilmember Moore, who hasn't spoken yet, and then we'll go back to Vice Mayor Chow and Councilmember Way will close us out before we vote. Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you. I just really want to thank staff for putting this information together. I'm looking at the mental health page on the website, and we have a tremendous number of resources and links that were added there. And it does say that if it's an emergency, call 911 or visit your emergency care provider. For mental health emergencies or crises, call 988. So I'm a little curious about what that number would route you to. And then I understand the focus, some of the information with the statistics is on the youth. What really struck me in this report is it looks like the highest rate is among, I would say, middle-aged adults, like 45 to 54 for the statistics, which I was looking at. And that kind of caught me by surprise. So I'm curious what that 988 number is. Thank you.
Perhaps one of our staff members or Mega Lin from the county would like to take on that question.
Yes, I can answer that question. 988 was a policy passed by the federal government a couple years ago to replace the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number. Right now, it's like the 8 or 9 digit number. And through this policy, there's a movement to change it to a 3-digit number, very similar to 911, so that it's much more easily remembered. I do think the implementation of 988 is not until July of next year, if I'm remembering correctly.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the information.
May I, okay, so we have this on our website though. So I think that could be particularly disturbing. So maybe I do see for immediate care, we have a national suicide hotline with the 800-273-8255. So perhaps staff could verify that we have these numbers correct, because I wouldn't want somebody calling 988 and then not getting anything. That would be pretty devastating. All right,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Just wanted to clarify, we did test the number and it is.
It's working?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. All right, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, this is the usual kind of collaborative Cupertino family and staff and resident and council effort. Kudos. Okay, so let me go to Vice Mayor Chow and Councilmember Way, as stated, we'll close this out before we vote. Vice Mayor Chow.
Okay, so I think one of the item from the policy is awareness for the community, and I see that we already have a mental health page and even a page for teens. And as we know that when we interview all the teen commissioners, #1 issue on their mind is mental health. I wonder if city staff or maybe the council can direct the teen commission to review the city website on resources. And I think the county behavioral resources has a ton more resources that the city site didn't list. I don't know whether we are up to date or what's the process to keep them up to date. Maybe the teen commission could have that task to help keep our mental health page up to date with the county. Yeah, just curious if that might be a way to involve teen commission with council work. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Chow. And finally, we have Councilmember Way.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. I like to add to Councilmember Willie's comments, and you're really correct. The hotlines are very important. So one policies that passed on Sacramento about 2 or 3 years ago, if you have high school kids, you would know that right now they're on the high school's kids or every high school's ID. If you turn the back, there are hotlines so that if they need help, the hotline's right there for them. I think that's what a policy maker can do to, to provide ways for people to seek help. So I really want to add to Councilmember Willie's suggestions, and our city can do much more. And I really want to say that my daughter would have been 37 years old right now if she did not pass away 17 and a half years ago. There is not one day pass I don't think of her. But like Councilmember Willie says, we cannot quantify how many people we reach out, how many lives we saved, but we know every reach out, every hug, every talk could save lives. So I really, again, want to commend interim city manager for putting this up. And I want to really thank Mayor Paul for considering my feelings. And I really appreciate you guys doing all this.
Absolutely. And I think you have a fully supportive community and council. I want to thank everyone for supporting this evening. Mego from the county, thank you for staying with us from that initial proclamation to this item. I do note that the federal legislation mandating that 1-800-273-TALK transition to 988 is, I think, a bit of it's a target by July 16th, 2022, apparently, that nationwide, wherever you are, it will go to that 800-273-TALK phone number. And so apparently it does work in Cupertino. I'll go ahead and ask our city clerk to conduct a roll call vote. But before we do so, I think I speak on behalf of all of council when I say you have our full support, and I think reflective of the community that we really are. Irrespective of our differences, I think we get a lot of the fundamental parts of things right, and this does seem like a very critically important element of it. So, Madam City Clerk, if you could please conduct that vote.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. And we will now move on to item number 17. Item number 17 is to consider adjustments to the revised athletic field use policy. And so with respect to this item, I believe that our Director of Recreation and Community Services, Joanne Magrini, is here to provide the staff report. Welcome, Director Magrini.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'd like to just provide one quick update. The notes I provided our city manager this evening on our events had a typo. So our Monster Mash is actually October 29th and not October 20th. So just wanted to make that clarification. My apologies. Let me get ready to share my screen here. Okay. All right. So tonight I will be presenting to you a review of the recent updates to the field use policy. Here's the agenda for tonight's presentation. We will be reviewing the history on the policy updates, a summary of Sunday use, additional questions received, and provide staff's recommendation on this item. So here's a brief history of the policy updates. The original policy was approved by the City Council in 2004. In fiscal year 2019-2020, a city work program item was assigned to review the policy, including Sunday reservation feasibility, scheduling, and program cost recovery.
Could I just make one comment? We're not seeing the PowerPoint that I think you do have. That would help.
Oh,
there
my
we go.
apologies. Yep.
Thank you.
Good catch, Councilmember Willie. Thank you.
Sorry for the interruption.
Nope, appreciate it. Thank you. Just should have asked if everybody could have seen it at the beginning. My apologies. Okay. So the proposed updates were presented to the Parks and Recreation Commission in April for review and input. And then on May the 4th, the City Council considered and approved the proposed adjustments but with the following amendments. A 2-year phased approach for the revised fees, and Sunday field reservation hours were expanded from the commission recommendation of 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. to add 2 additional hours for use from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The City Council directed staff to present the impacts of the revised policy 1 year after implementation to provide a status update. So this table summarizes the changes to Sunday use. The original and current policy allow organizations to reserve up to 2 Sundays for tournaments. After performing community outreach and surveying both sports organizations and residents, staff had proposed allowing organizations to reserve up to 4 additional Sundays for games and practices. As a result, each organization could reserve up to 6 Sundays per year, including the 2 tournaments. The Parks and Recreation Commission recognized the request for additional Sunday reservations, but in consideration of recreational use of the fields by residents and families, the commission recommended reducing the staff recommendation of 4 Sundays to 2 additional Sundays. Each organization could then reserve up to 4 Sundays per year, still including 2 tournaments. City Council had approved the recommendation for Sunday use as proposed by the Parks and Recreation Commission. A question was asked about how many sports organizations do not need Sunday use. Back in January, when staff surveys youth sports organizations about Sunday use, all 9 permitted groups responded that they would like to use Sundays for practices, games, or tournaments. Since the implementation of the new policy, 2 additional organizations have received field permits. Staff continually receive inquiries from organizations about acquiring field permits. Another question was asked, how this item impacts the current dog off leash area project, known as the DOLA. Staff will be recommending the conclusion of the DOLA trial and the official establishment of the DOLA at Jollyman Park. Staff will collect feedback from community and continue to monitor the revised athletic field use policy to evaluate and possibly establish a DOLA at another park site. Staff's recommendation is to keep the revised athletic field use policy as approved by council in May and to review the policy in 1 year as originally directed. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Director Magrini from council? I don't see any. Well, okay, now I see 2 hands raised. Councilmember Moore, followed by Councilmember Way.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. I was just curious what the 2 new organizations were. And thank you, Joanne, for the report. And I do think that there was some confusion from one group that there would be 10 extra days, and I think that maybe is part of the issue there. If you can speak to that, it would help.
Sure. So we extrapolated out Deanza Force as an organization. So they are not really an additional organization, but they are. So they were using it under an umbrella organization previously. And then there's Kids Fan Base, which is a soccer group as well. So those are the 2 new groups. Sorry, did you have another question?
Yes. So how is that going with Deanza Force being separated out? Was that an okay transition? No problem?
Yes. I mean, so far, so good. We're only 2.5 months in. We're still working out a lot of kinks, but we are working through everything and it seems to be going rather well.
Okay, excellent. Glad to hear it.
Yeah. The other item about the 10 Sundays. So the other stipulation that council directed staff to do as a behind the scenes organizational aspect was to ensure that no site had more than 10 Sundays used a year. So it has nothing to do with how many Sundays an organization actually has available to them. It just is a coordination effort on the back end to try and efficiently coordinate field use on the same Sundays, if possible, to decrease impact in those areas at those parks that are being used.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Followed by Councilmember Way.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. I have 2 questions. I think this item came back because the Cricket Academy emailed a couple councils they would like to, because they can only use the library field, which is conforming to their playing. So they're asking, can they have more Sundays on? So my 2 questions are, on each field, only 10 Sundays per year. Are they full? Are they do we have 10 Sundays per year per field so far? The second question is on the 4 Sundays that each team is allowed, for example, cricket, can the cricket team play on all on library field? Is that possible so that they can, really use the field that is conforming to what they need?
So yes, let me answer the first question. So I can tell you what we have, because we have not scheduled in this manner before, so it's hard to compare historical data. And so all I have available to me is what we have booked for the current season. And the current season started July 1st and goes through December 31st. And so right now, our Sunday requests per organization are 9 total Sundays. And they are at various sites. So there are 2 Sundays at Library Field, 1 Sunday at Garden Gate, and so on and so forth. There are 3 Sundays requested for games and 6 Sundays requested for tournament use. So I think from what we've seen for the first half of the new policy being implemented, the Sunday use seems manageable from the 10 sites. However, I will say as a caveat, spring is the more popular season, and so we will probably see an uptick in use on Sundays in the spring because a lot of the baseball and soccer organizations will utilize those fields. From the standpoint about the use of the cricket field, what has been approved previously is use of the cricket field for pickup games. And so the problem is there are groups that go and use these fields when they're not permitted. I think that the special circumstance is that the cricket field is used, the entire field is used for their purposes. You can hit the ball ahead of you, behind you, there's no foul lines, you use the entire field space. And so in order to have a pickup game, you would not be able to have badminton playing out there or soccer. And so there becomes this issue with other people wanting to utilize the field when a pickup game is going on. And so I think that's what the complaint-based issue is on Sundays out at the cricket field.
Thank you for the clarification, Joy.
Hey, thank you. Next, we have Vice Mayor Chow.
So I'm still confused. So we did get this request from the Cricket Academy. They would like to be able to use Library Field for 10 days because they said that's the only place they can play cricket. So for the other teams, that's currently getting 4 Sundays. And when they have tournament, 4 Sundays actually means 1 tournament day, but they could be playing in 2 or 3 parks. So if we are talking about days per park, those teams are even though they only play 4 Sundays, they might be occupying 12 or more days.
That's
per park, right?
Correct. So
that's why Cricket Academy feel it's not fair to them because they couldn't possibly do 4 Sundays for their tournament because they have to spread it out into multiple weeks because there is only 1 park where they can play.
Understood.
So it's not equitable between.
So there are 7 soccer organizations that have permits and 13 fields available for soccer. And then we have cricket. We have 1 cricket, 1 volleyball, 1 softball, and 1 baseball. And softball has 2 fields available, baseball 3. So you're correct in that to provide a tournament space, they have 1 field as opposed to multiple fields. But I would say that other organizations also have limited field availability as well. Not 1, but limited. Soccer is our most available field in the field use that we have in Cupertino.
So like for softball, they have 2 fields. That means 4 Sundays. That means they can do a maximum of 8 Sunday games, right?
So a tournament is different than a game. So a game is just, they get one field for their games. So I'd like to separate out the Sundays. I know it sounds super confusing, but they only get 2 Sundays where they can have tournaments. And then the other Sundays are only one field, not multiple fields, not multiple sites, one field for games or practices. So you are correct in the fact that cricket only has one field available to them for their 2 Sunday tournaments.
Yeah, so for soccer, 2 Sunday tournaments could mean 20 fields. For softball, 2 Sunday
13.
tournaments should be 26, right? So for softball, 2 Sunday tournaments could be 4 fields. But for cricket, 2 Sunday tournaments would be only 2 fields.
Correct.
So that's not equitable. So shouldn't we then allow more days for cricket? Because we have only one field available for them to have tournaments. So they will have to do 4 Sundays for tournament by breaking it up into 4 Sundays. I think that's the reason we have this on the council agenda again, right?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Chow. Next, we have Councilmember Willie. And at that point, I'm going to bring it back to the public to see if anyone has comments. And then we'll bring it back. Councilmember Moore, you can have the first comment after that. Councilmember Willie.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. I realize when you have that many different groups and those fields, you really have a challenge of getting everything in sync. And I also understand, that the cricket group, has a challenge when they only have the one field that has, as I understand it, their needed pitching mound. And so what I would kind of ask in terms of a question, we've got something on the order of like 13 fields, and trying to make the most for our community, what would be the cost? And I think, conceivably it's well within our budget to conceivably put in a pitching mound at a second field so that then they do have the ability to use something other than just library field. I think library field would be their first choice, but rather than being turned away, that there is another field. And so is it possible for you to comment? What would it cost us to put a pitching mound at another field?
So sure. I don't know the cost. However, I know that there was a feasibility study that was done a few years back to analyze what other locations could be considered for cricket. It's just cricket takes up a vast amount of space. And so it's very challenging in order to find a location that would be suitable. I will let you know that according to the Cupertino California Cricket Academy's website, the locations that they do utilize besides Library Field are Homestead High School, which is located in Cupertino, Collins Elementary School, which is the batting or their hitting cages out there at in Cupertino. And then they have 3 other locations, one in San Jose, Dilworth Elementary, one in Santa Clara, the new Luther Turf pitch field that they just opened recently, and then one over in Fremont at Fremont Central Park.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I'll take it over to members of the public. If anyone would like to speak on this item, I don't see any hands raised. And so without hands raised, let me bring it back. And as I promised, Councilmember Moore, if you'd like to bring a motion, please feel free to do so. But if you have any follow-up comment or question at this point, that's perfectly fine as well.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Paul. I was just curious what the difference in length of time for a cricket match versus, I know soccer is 90 minutes, but you generally show up an hour before that for the warm up. So you need the space for 2.5 hours. But how long does cricket take? I don't know.
I've heard, and I don't know either, that the games can get lengthy up to 3 to 4 hours long. I will let you know that they do not have the full time reserved for Saturday use. So there are hours still available for use if they did need additional space on Saturdays, based on their requests. But again, I would just say we're being very flexible with the organizations to work through this scheduling, because they haven't had to schedule this in this manner prior. They just had a blanket permit and they could use the field whenever they needed to. And now having to give us days and times that they're going to be out there, we're trying to be flexible and work with them to make sure that the organizations and we are tracking that appropriately.
All right, thank you.
Great. So with just a couple of months of data points, how is field usage looking like? Or is sort of the intended purpose of opening it up to the public being satisfied here? Are we seeing, and maybe it's just anecdotal at this point, Director Magrini, but does the data that we have thus far, albeit limited, indicate that there is availability for athletic use purposes, or is the public well enjoying the newly available fields?
So I'm hopeful that we will have some additional permanent signage implemented very soon at the different field locations, not just at the city field locations, but at the joint use agreement fields that we have as well. That will give people the ability to see what is scheduled. We have schedules up on our website by the month. I would say they're not the most user-friendly versions. Again, we're still working through that information. But I think what you will find ultimately is that once we're able to get that signage up and educate people about where to find the information, I think it will be well received by the community, because they will know when the fields are available to them.
Okay. Well, I guess really my question is, if there's the availability there, or my point sort of is, if there is that availability there, I'd be more inclined to, try to accommodate some of the requests that are out there. So, as we're gathering the data for the full year, which is what staff is asking that we support, hopefully that is being, evaluated as we go along. Just to my council colleagues, I know that we have a very busy work plan, as we'll see in the update in the next item, but I would be okay with checking in midway, after a couple of quarters. I suppose I would put us out about 5 months from now to see how that data is doing. Perhaps not necessarily a full-fledged, item and staff report, but, one of those 10-minute check-ins, 5-minute check-ins to see, what the data is telling us. So just a suggestion to put out there. I'm not putting it in a motion right now, but I would like to, put that out there also for staff so that they can be aware of that kind of information that, we'd like to see if we're evaluating this going forward. Councilmember Way.
So very shortly, I really like what Mayor Paul suggests, because I'm following up Vice Mayor's kind of a suggestion that this is not equitable for cricket because they can only play on library field. We really want to satisfy neighborhood requests too. So 10 Sundays per location. We have 15 locations. I think that's reasonable, protection for the residents. So if library fields is not using 10 Sundays per year, maybe we can accommodate cricket to play it more on that. So maybe a 6 months report, like Mayor Paul suggests, could indicate that, so we can be a little bit more flexible. That I totally agree with that.
Thank you, Councilmember Way. Vice Mayor Chow.
Yeah, I don't know what the city has done when they did the cricket evaluation. I try to look for combined usage. So this is a 2 soccer field with a cricket mount in the middle. This is in Fremont. And this is another baseball field that you can add a cricket mound here so that the field could be used for both. So this is Wilson Park. Actually, I'm wondering, could we possibly add a mound here? And this could be used for cricket too. I don't know whether what other considerations are there. Yeah, just throwing it out there. And for this item, I would like to propose that we allow more for cricket specifically, since we have one field. So maybe we allow count rather than counting days, but how many field days total that they are allowed. Maybe, I don't know, I think they want 10. Is 10 too much? I'm not sure, maybe 6. As we know, they have other field to use besides Cupertino, so is 6 enough? But they don't have a rep here, so I'm not sure. Okay, I think Greg wants to say something.
Interim City Manager Larson, did Vice Mayor Chow have that right?
Yes, she did. It's actually a question for Director McGreeny. How many other groups are using Library Field on Sunday? Do we have any other reservations for Library Field on Sunday
No, we do
besides
not.
cricket?
We do not.
So even if you were to leave 2 of those Sundays open for other groups during the spring season, then there could be a potential additional 4 Sunday uses for cricket at Library Field beyond the 4 they have. Or the council could choose to leave 4 open, in which case cricket would get 6, but to still keep it within the 10. Is that kind of what Councilmember Way and Vice Mayor are proposing?
Yeah,
would be to
kind
give
of.
cricket a couple extra Sundays there.
Yeah.
And my only recommendation is going into spring, which Director McGreeny said is the busier period, to preclude any other group from using Library Field might be inequitable the other way. So I think leaving at least 2 dates available for other groups to book Sundays at Library Field might be a better test as we're in this kind of first year rollout, but it's obviously the council's choice.
Yeah, thank you. Good suggestion. I think since we are piloting this year, we will see an update. Maybe that's just allow Creative Academy for more days on library, and then we can assess, right? So maybe I'm thinking 6 Sundays rather than, I think now they get only 2 extra tournament days. So they'll get 6 extra tournament days if they have only 1 field per tournament. So I guess that can apply for any team, not just cricket. Just if you have tournament days, but you are using 1 field per tournament days, then you could use reserve 6 tournament days. But then, of course, for every park, the max is still 10, no more than 10 for every park.
So if I might just jump in, I think that adding these little nuances adds confusion for other organizations. And other organizations serve many more residents and will be pleading for Sunday use as well. So I just want us to be as articulate as we possibly can about exactly what we are extending, because I think a lot of the confusion was about this, 10 Sundays per site. The group started to think they were getting 10 Sundays when all in fact they were getting was 4 Sundays total. So, and I know that the tournament verbiage actually adds to the confusion, but what I want to say is every organization right now gets 4 Sundays. They get 4 Sundays. Yes, what you're saying about the tournament use, they get multiple sites, multiple fields. So if you want to allow cricket because they only have 1 site to have additional Sundays for tournaments, I think we just need to be very specific about that.
Well, this is what I would suggest, since we don't actually have any field use participants out here today. Perhaps staff can come back, and give us some clarity in your suggested language, at the midway point, after half a year, and make sure that I'm sure the equities will be, satisfied to staff's, requirements, and hopefully we can input as well the usage data. So that's what I would suggest at this point. I don't think that there's any grave urgency right now, especially given that we don't have any input right now from the public. I'm not sure if that was due to scheduling or what, for whatever reason, but it does seem that kind of figuring stuff out on the fly, for multiple reasons, and it's not just, the logistics. It's, over time I've come to realize that you have to have your staff buy-in as well, right? I mean, you have to have that kind of, willingness to look forward. And so I would suggest that we set the direction in that area and then just say, look, take some input over the next 4 months, and please come back to us with a plan that will hopefully, you can't make everyone happy all the time, but hopefully it can accommodate some of those requests out there to the extent that we can, and still be fair to the aims of, trying to provide accessibility to the public. Councilmember Moore, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I'm just a little curious about this limit of 10 Sunday reservations for each site per year. Does that mean, and is it still, you permit for the first 6 months, January, June, and then July to December? Is that how it's going now, or and how would the 10 get broken up?
So I think that staff agreed that we could accommodate this request when this item came, which I don't know if we should have agreed to it. I think that we may come back to you and say the 10 Sundays is not doable at the sites, but I think we're going to try our best to coordinate and create efficiencies in that area. But we may come back and say, 20 is more realistic or something of that nature. But I know that was something that council had directed as an add to us implementing the Sunday use. So we're trying our best.
Okay, thank you. And so how many, I guess we started at the second half of the year. Did that mean that because it was the first time we were doing this, that we have 10 Sundays for this July period till December?
No, it would be for the first, the year goes July 1st to June 30th.
Oh, okay.
So it's like with the fiscal year.
Oh, okay, because that's actually a change from what we had before. Okay, because we used to pay for half of the year. Okay, and then how many Sundays are left on the table right now? If they're only getting 2?
So are you speaking about cricket specifically? They have 1 tournament and 1 game scheduled for this first half of the year so far. So they still have a tournament and a game Sunday available for the next half of the year.
Okay, and no other organization like volleyball or anything has requested that space. What other organizations would want that space?
I believe it was volleyball was the other organization that was using it.
Okay, and I have just kind of a side question. When we have these, the field agreement with the schools, are we paying to irrigate those fields, or is the school doing that? Just a side issue, just kind of curious.
I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, because I am curious, like with Hyde, because you've got the baseball field and the track, it's super well irrigated. I'm wondering if we're footing the bill on that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other feedback points? My request would be, so the 2 months, are those July and August at this point? Are we not including September? You're mentioning 2 months of available data right now?
So we have, so again, we're trying to be flexible with the groups. And so we didn't normally we have them request all of their time for that season, meaning July 1st through December 31st on May 1st. But this policy didn't get enacted until July 1st. So we were being flexible, and with the change in policy, we were allowing them to give us their requests and make changes. So for July 1st to December 30th, we have 2 requests for library field for Sunday use.
Okay, and that maxes out the 6-month period, is that correct?
Well, so they have 4 total. So if they wanted to use all 4 in this season, they could, but they would have nothing available. Correct. They would have nothing available for the next, yeah.
Okay, okay. I see. So if we were to visit this halfway through this cycle, it would be from July through December. So conceivably, you could get back to us maybe second meeting in January? Would that be too much of a strain on resources, or, you know?
We're collecting the data. We're collecting the data, so it would not be a strain to provide you an update.
Okay, and maybe we can work it out with staff, but I really just see it as a midpoint check-in, 5-10 minutes. I don't know precisely where we would place that, but maybe a presentation or something like that. Councilmember Moore, you have your hand raised still, or is that from before?
No, I raised it again. So I'm wondering also if there could be some suggestions for simplification, because I feel like I need a master's in field use policy to understand this. Okay. That would be appreciated. Thank you.
I also think that there's some recommendations that we would like to make to simplify as well from a staffing standpoint. And I will just let you know that I did get the answer. CUSD does pay for the water at the sports fields that we maintain.
Okay, thank you.
So they're paying for maintenance for us. Okay, got it. But they're paying for the water. Okay, well, does staff feel like they have sufficient direction from council at this point? Do you feel like you need a motion to bring this back in the late January timeframe, or can we proceed with the input that you've received up to this point?
Go ahead, Greg.
My belief is we can just take that as direction from the council, if that's the council's concurrence. This item only came back to council because 2 members of council requested it. Staff didn't have a work program to bring it back forward, but we wanted to be respectful of the council's desire.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. Okay, yeah, and if we wanted to encapsulate it, let's try to be open to the public and accommodating to the people, using and enjoying the fields. I think that's the general idea, and hopefully we can, achieve both of those things in ever increasing and improving incremental steps. And hopefully we can see it again in the second half of January. Thanks very much. We're on to item number 18, which is the last item on our agenda. I believe that is our work plan update, and that should be Interim City Manager Larson. This was requested by Councilmember Willie. So thanks to Councilmember Willie, this is a good idea to get a sense of where we stand since our work program is quite full. And so we're going to get a Q4 update, as well as, I believe, Interim City Manager, some indication of where we are year to date. Oh, no, actually, we're waiting until October, right, to get the Q1 update for this fiscal year.
Well, Councilmember Willie's request that we placed on the agenda was the Q4 update to wrap up last year's work program. And just to give you some highlights and let the public know, as the council already knows, where we were in terms of wrapping up last year's work. But we've also already moved on to this year's work. And so the council adopted the new work program in May, I believe it was. And there's a number of items on there. Mr. Willie's request of council was to have a top 10 come back. So the staff report took the 10 highest priorities from the council priority setting session. And we've just given you previews of what we're doing this quarter. We're not here to do a full quarterly report because the quarter's not over. we'll come back to you in October with that website presentation, and then we'll fold it into the November quarterly review. And that's when you'll see the full update on where we are with this year's work program. But in keeping with Councilman Willie's request, we did want to give you the top 10 highlights. And I may have just stolen half of Katie's presentation, but I'm sure she can shrink it down to the highlights given the hour.
That sounds perfect. Thank you so much for framing that. And welcome back. I'm sorry, is it interim Deputy City Manager Nomura? Am I getting that that full title correct?
I'll defer to Greg,
Okay,
but I've been introducing myself as Key Nomura Deputy City Manager. It is an acting role for now.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, I forgot the modifier.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I'm happy to be before you tonight. Hopefully everyone can see the presentation. Greg did go into a bit of background, so I won't repeat, but I did want to explain some of the attachments. So the first two attachments, A and B, pertain to fiscal year 21, which just closed out. And so attachment A is a detailed summary. Attachment B is just the quick summary. If you want the snapshot of where we're at with those items, that's where you can find them. Attachment C pertains to the fiscal year 22 city workbook. And the fiscal year 21 work program was adopted in March 2020 and amended in June 2020 due to impacts of COVID. We provided quarterly updates through the dashboard at cupertino.org/ework program, as well as with our quarterly budget updates. The fiscal year 22 city work program was adopted in May. Here's a quick review of the 15 items from fiscal year 21 that were completed. I wanted to hit some highlights of items. So reducing secondhand smoke. The ordinance was approved on June 1st, 2021. The Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan, I put the link for number 9 there. That's been posted on the website. And then we also have the housing program for DeAnza students. The city allocated $25,000 to support a housing assistance grant program, as well as a housing sharing program. And they have successfully supported 3 eligible students to give them housing assistance. There were 3 items that we anticipated finishing by the closeout of the fiscal year. We do need a few more months to finish these out, so this expresses kind of their next steps, as well as our expected completion date, which is very soon. So I won't read all of these, but I will say for the housing survey, as you saw, it was initially anticipated that we may be able to bring it at tonight's meeting, but given we wanted to prioritize the contract that went tonight and the housing survey update and the housing element discussion will happen in October. And as promised, here is the sneak preview of Q1 for fiscal year 22. These are your top 10 items. I will, again, these more detailed snapshot summaries are in your staff report, but I will go through some highlights. For the homeless jobs program, number 6, the city has selected West Valley Community Services to pilot our program to employ 2 unhoused Cupertino residents. And we expect that to begin in October. For Memorial Park improvements, the project is on schedule and we're preparing specs to go out to bid to remove the ponds, fill the ponds, and ultimately replace or install irrigated turf, likely in that area. This is not the long-term plan. The long-term plan for that area will be determined as part of the specific plan process. And number 9, consider new commissions and committees. We wanted to highlight that this is one of the interim city manager's priorities and will be is anticipated to be brought to council in November. And the shuttle bus pilot, number 10, as you received an update there, the relaunch is anticipated for October. And a recent survey indicated that 90% of the respondents were ready to ride again. So this is great news. In addition to the top 10, we thought there are a couple other items that may be of keen interest to the council. So for RENA, we wanted to update you that our RENA numbers as of May are 1,193 very low income units, 687 low income units, 755 moderate income units, and 1,953 above moderate income units for a grand total of 4,588 units. We're closely associating this item with the housing element update, hence why we put in trends housing element. And we hope to bring you an update on this in October. For Lawrence Mitty, number 11 in our priority order, annexation is expected to complete as early as February 2022. There is an RFQ that just had responses due for the specific plan. And for the municipal water system, that we hope to have a presentation of key terms and proposed amendments to the existing lease scheduled for October. And next steps, you can find these updates at this cupertino.org/city work program, as well as in your staff report. We will be updating the dashboard in October and presenting a Q1 update for fiscal year 22 to council in November. And I will be available for any questions.
Great, thank you, Katie. And we have a question from Councilmember Willie, followed by Vice Mayor Chow.
I guess it's appropriate that I go first since I was requesting this. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Greg. You know, been waiting. If you could go back to your 2020-21 list, I've got a couple questions there. Again, more or less, I want to be up to speed of where we're at. I want the community to understand where we're at. So on this one, the two questions I've got is, what can you tell us about item number 5? The research governor's $1.4 billion pledge toward homelessness. What can you tell us about that? Do we have any feel for, are we going to get $50 million, $70 million? And if we were, how might we use that? I'll start with that question.
Sure. Good evening. This is Carrie Huesler, Housing Manager, and this was a task in the Housing Division. And we tracked the governor's $1.4 billion pledge and all of the funding that was coming into Cupertino. And some key examples this last few months would be Project Home Key. And we've been actively working with the county and Destination Home to seek any additional funds for homelessness items. But I think this was one of the precursors to a lot of the homeless efforts we've been working on in Cupertino as well. I would say too that this pot of money was right before COVID. So the actual 1.4 billion, I think, shifted a bunch with the pandemic. But the main takeaway is that we have been on top of all potential funding sources and bringing as much as we can to serve our unhoused residents in Cupertino.
So do we have an idea of, you know, what we might likely, and then how we might be allocating that for the community, you know, so that they kind of have an idea?
I can work on that and bring back some numbers.
Yeah, and I should, you know, kind of put a qualifier in there that, you know, those would be the types of questions, and don't feel you're on the spot to answer them tonight. But I feel I'm trying to ask questions that the community would be asking. And then similarly on number 6, you know, where might we stand, you know, review city's housing and human services grant funds. Where might that stand? Do we have some services that we'd like to expand, or do we have, you know, what can we tell the community?
Sure. So I'm happy to report for the city's housing and human services grant funds. As part of our application process last year in our review, council had prioritized transportation to and from service providers. So combining the thought process from number 6 and number 7 on the slide. And we were able to add $7,500 in funds to the contract with West Valley Community Services to provide bus passes for our unhoused residents to receive services or to move around to services that were within and outside of Cupertino. We are 100% adequately funded on our grant applications in this current cycle. So I would say every time we open up our RFP for housing and human services grant funds, we're reviewing to make sure that we're covering all of the requests. And when we do have a shortfall where we're not able to fund programs that come in, we will bring that to council. So this is
Great.
an ongoing thought process.
Great. If you could now switch over, I guess, back to Katie, to the top 10 list, and I'll ask a couple questions there. And so number 2, the ELI, BMR, the Mary, the Outback Steakhouse, you know, I think regular updates for the community, you know, first there's the Mary Street project, and how far along is that? Are there obstacles there? Then came up with the idea about the Outback, and any update there, has that moved along at all? Anything that we might be able to share with the community? That would be that question. Again, I don't want to put you on the spot tonight, but those are the type of things that the community, I think, would, you know, be happy to hear about.
Councilman Willie, if I may, Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
through Mr. Mayor, if I could just respond really quickly on that one. Item number 2, I believe you should be, we working closely with the Public Works Department, might be bringing something back to you on that number 2 item, specifically addressing the Mary Avenue. We've been working, staff and working, our department as well as Public Works Department working pretty hard on in the behind the scenes trying to get that site set up. There's a lot of legwork before we can even bring it to you for a map to designate that site for housing. So we're hoping that we'll bring something for you soon, hopefully by the end of the year. In terms of Outback Steakhouse, that's I believe county has entered into a purchasing contract for the site. I'm sure they will reach out to us to participate, but right now we're not in that process yet. But I don't know if Greg has more to offer on that.
I just wanted to offer one additional comment that's recent news that Apple Computer is continuing their discussions per the study session council did on Friday back in June, I believe it was, July, with the county regarding Outback and other potential affordable housing locations. There's no action yet for the city because it's still discussions between 2 other entities, but it will eventually come to the city for further review. And I suspect it'll be by the end of this year.
Great.
Calendar year, excuse me.
Great. If I can just jump in one last question, you know, because again, these are, you know, questions that the community has. So revisit number 3, revisit the 5G. So we had the study session and we requested staff to go off, look at the ordinances that other communities have, the spacing between the small cells, the distances from the small cells to, say, residential bedrooms, things like that. And can you tell us when that'll come to us for, you know, review as an agenda item? Give us some type of idea.
I can take that one. Members of council, Chad Mosley, city engineer. We're working, both the city attorney's office and public works are working on looking at various ordinances and revisions to the guidelines to meet the requests that were made at the April study session. We're hoping to bring that to you by the end of the year, hopefully in December, for you to review at that point in time.
Great, thank you. I mean, that it gives us something to let the residents know when they ask. Thank you.
Great. Next we have Vice Mayor Chow.
Hi. Thank you for the quarterly update. Really, this is really great. But I'm curious on how come community garden wasn't not finished, and the Linda Vista Trail, so they are not considered a Q4 completion, or this doesn't include public works project?
Were those CIP projects, Chad, and not part of the work program for last year?
Yeah, if I don't recall Linda Vista Trail being on the work plan last year, and the community gardens were in the CIP program, not necessarily on the work program, if I recall.
Right. Yeah, this is Roger Lee, Director of Public Works. We also have another community, the satellite community gardens that are located, citywide, not
Yeah,
just
so
reserve.
how is the progress for that? That's not listed, so I'm just curious.
I know that it's gone to the Park and Rec Commission, and Director McGreeny may have more information than me, but I believe that they're getting down to a short list of sites for it to be for them to be considered at.
Yes, we're slowly tracking that item. No updates to provide at this time.
So is there a timeline we expect that we will roll out?
It's part of the CIP projects right now, and so we have different priorities, and so we're managing our priorities as best we can, especially with COVID.
Okay. So how is the top 10 list decided?
Well, this is what was asked for at the last council meeting. These are the top 10 ranked items from the council's priority setting session where you adopted. And so we just provided updates on these top 10 in advance of the full update that you'll get in October.
Okay.
So based on Councilman Willie's request, we just provided the update on these 10.
Okay, I guess it's different from my understanding. My understanding was maybe it was when Councilmember Whaley asked Deb for top 10. He was asking for each of us to propose 2 items, and then with 5 council members, we'll have top 10. So the 2 items that have always been on the top of my list is the objective standards and the development accountability. That has been on my top list since 2019, and then it has been, I see very little progress, and now with even single family home lot division and duplex will be streamlined. That means most of the city ordinance standards were adopted with the discretionary approval in mind. But then now a lot of these standards will be put under the so-called objective standards, and then for most of them, they might become no standard. And so this is something we should have started reviewing since 2017 when SB 35 was moving towards using objective standards. For example, how we calculate the square footage for commercial and the residential, that's something we have not clarified either, because that was abused. And so this kind of objective standards, because our square footage was determined with a single family in mind, and now single family will be duplex. It will be streamlined, and our standards will be insufficient. So,
And I think when we do the full quarterly update, the council can tell us which ones to move faster on and which ones to move slower on. And that's what the full quarter update. This is really just a top 10 preview using the top 10 items the council chose in the priority setting session. And I wasn't aware of the every council member chooses 2 model. We just counted down the top 10 from the priority setting session the council held, and that's what we've reported on.
Right.
okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to add that there is a little bit of information, in case it's helpful, in the supplemental memo that we provided based on a council member question, that that we will be having a tentatively scheduled planning commission hearing regarding that includes objective standards on September 28th. And we expect it to go to council in October.
Oh, okay, that's great to know.
And that's for the general plan related objective standards, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
as well as environmentally related objective standards that would be added to the zoning ordinance.
Thanks for the reminder that I'd seen that file. I have it open, but it's a 2-page file that came in a little bit later. And that's 2 out of 3 items regarding items including objective standards. I have a question that's a little bit out of school, but I want to pose it to the interim city manager, since he and I did make a visit out there, both to this location and to Lawrence Mitty on the other side of town. So Greg, yeah, I forget which one of us was in the bout of illness. I think it was you. You had your first turn. Neither of us had COVID, thankfully. But when we went out to Stockemeyer, I didn't really follow up with you on your impressions. I know that's a long-standing issue in our city, right? It's an historic house, and so I was wondering what your impressions are. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but given the interest that's definitively out there, and this being a long-standing issue, it's not repairing itself. So I'm just wondering what your impressions at this point are.
Future city manager housing. No, I'm joking. It's a tremendous resource that could be a historic asset for the community. It will take substantial investment for it to be reused as any sort of community asset, just for the historic preservation of the property and the remediation of the ravages of time, as well as making it ADA accessible and others for possible use right there on the trail. It's a great location, proximate to the golf course as well. So many, many amenities, but it's going to take significant prioritization in the CIP at some point in the future to make steady progress on it. The other site the mayor and I visited, I would be excited to give a brief update on, if I may, Mayor, which is Lawrence Mitty. We had heard of some unhoused residents out at the city's Lawrence Mitty site. And when the mayor and I toured out there, we actually saw a number of prior campsites and current campsites out there. And your staff has been almost daily, including our service partners like Abode Services and West Valley Community Services and the county sheriff, as well as public works staff and housing staff, been going out there almost every day of the week, both doing kind of a census of what are our current population of residents living there, and it has dropped dramatically. I don't want to put Chad on the spot, but the last number I heard, I think 10 days ago, was probably 4 campsites out there, and I don't know if we've seen a change. But what we have noticed is there's been lots of damage to the fence. So there's been regularly repair of the fence. We've put up some barricades to prevent vehicles from entering the site, so it would become an RV park that's unsanctioned. And we've been focusing services such as the jobs program that was mentioned earlier. That was one of the council's priority. The contract with West Valley Community Services is asking them to target first potential unhoused residents that are out at Lawrence Mitty as possibly the first 2 candidates for job opportunities through the council-initiated jobs program for our unhoused population. We are also looking at much more dramatic security improvements that will require an expenditure of funds. Public Works and Police, Sheriff's Office, have been looking at a trailer with lighting and motion detector and automatic radio notification that would alert the Sheriff's Department when we have unexpected visitors out there at Lawrence Mitty. And what I think is most exciting is how Public Works is dovetailing a couple of your priorities. We've gone out and tested the berms and the piles of rubble that are out on the site, that it's your staff's belief those will have to go for the park design that we want to get started as soon as the RFP is done that the director just mentioned. but maybe as soon as we're allowed to by environmental regulations, which would put it in the February, March timeframe, we remove the pile of rubble and we remove the berms so there's no longer hidden campsites, which makes it harder for our law enforcement to police and track. And we've tested the piles, and we believe they're suitable and appropriate for possibly being used at the fill at the ponds at Memorial Park. So instead of having to acquire fill, we would relocate the fill. It still costs money. It's not free. It's trucking the fill, but at least we're not having to buy additional fill, and we're kind of curing two problems with one stone. So these are efforts your staff is working on since that visit we made to Lawrence Mitty, both the day-to-day checking in, the security improvements, and the long-term improvements. The last thing, if I could pipe in, we also wanted to make it kind of an all-hands effort, given the civic engagement discussions the council has had. So your emergency services team will be activating the block leader program once we're ready to start rolling out plans and doing block parties or door knocking with the sheriff's office of the neighborhood right across the creek from the future Lawrence Mitty site to get them engaged with what we're planning to do to improve not only their short-term safety, but the long-term amenity that the city council is planning for that side of town. So, sorry, that was an impromptu speech, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity from the mayor.
No, excellent. I've got a few takeaways from that. It sounds like work early and often to work on Stockmeyer, which makes sense. We do have at least one subcommittee out there interfacing with Historical Society. And one of the topics is, in fact, Stockmeyer. I'm really glad that you and I had the opportunity to go out there, interim city manager Larson, just to see the potential of the space. With respect to Lawrence Mitty, kudos for the fast turnaround there. I pass there every weekday morning after dropping the kids off and then driving to work. So I did notice there seemed to be some significant amount of moving equipment along Lawrence Expressway for 1 or 2 days last week. And so it's interesting to hear what you're saying with regard to the environmental, testing, and in terms of moving, potential fill over. Perhaps we can couple it with an exercise program and our bike program, and just really put some sweat equity into work with making our population more healthy. But in any event, I think a couple of our high priorities have to do with homelessness, and it seems like we're converging on a point where there's a lot of political will up and down the spectrum. The Biden administration has recently committed to very significant amounts of funding as well as targets to create housing, particularly for the homeless population. And so that dovetails all the way down to our local level efforts, with Apple apparently stepping into the conversation. And so I know we're keeping our ear to the ground. It's always great to hear West Valley Community Services, working with us, and their reach is, very, very broad. But of course, that all, goes back and forth over time based upon what the needs and optimizations are. So, thank you. I'm not going to turn this into a free-for-all for touching every part of our work program. We have this information out there. If anybody has any follow-up comments, think about those. I'll go ahead and go to the members of the public that are in attendance to see if anybody would like to speak to this item. I do see 5 members of the public here, so let me provide them a moment if anyone would like to speak to item number 18 to raise their hand or hands. So I'm not seeing anyone from the public with the hand raised to make comments. I'll bring it back to council with Councilmember Moore. Did you want to make some closing comments or a question with regard to item 18?
I just have a brief couple of comments about it. I really appreciate the staff report, and it looks like there's a lot of information that would be great in the Cupertino scene, perhaps. Sharing information. I'm really curious about how the work program for the homeless, how that works out. If there were interviews perhaps in the future, I think it would be a really great story for the public to hear. And I like that we have the dark skies policy mentioned, and I would kind of like to see this information here put out in the newsletter for the public, showing what we've accomplished and what we're working on right now. And I just think it tells a really good story that things are moving ahead, and that the issues that the people have are being addressed. I attended one of the single-use plastic ordinance meetings. I believe it was with the Teen Commission, and I was really interested in hearing the very first kind of comments and how that process starts rolling through, and from start to when we end up with a completed ordinance. And I think that, particularly for people who are just getting interested in city government, it's a really interesting story for them to follow and see how the process works. So I really like this report. There's so much work being done, and I think that needs to be communicated. So kudos to everybody.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Councilmember Moore. You know, I think we're doing a good job improving our processes on the front end of our agenda items. You know, and it's been a complete team effort, honestly. Over time, it's been a synergization of our various commissions and committees together with council. We've worked with staff to bring our work plan in lockstep with all the advisory commissions and committees with council. But at the same time, you know, I look out there, and there are narratives that we're not really working on the other end of process here that I think that we really need to be. And Councilmember Moore's comments, I think, are geared largely to kind of getting that information out there. Because if you look at our work plan, we have such an enormous number of items we consider. And when you look at any one of those items, you know, maybe it doesn't comprise an entire novel, but there's a really good story in each and every one of these items that simply just never gets told at all. I mean, you know, every now and then I'm asked for a soundbite, you know, somewhat more frequently these days, you know, which is appreciated. But I think, you know, given the fact that we have so much process that goes into it, all these different feedback points, you know, many of which, you know, they interact with each other in such salient and interesting ways. I mean, they should be memorialized, right? We shouldn't be characterized by people kind of flying in, you know, and wanting to take, you know, whatever profit, you know, mainly profit, and kind of gearing the message around that, you know, motivation. You know, it really is a community of people that are working together and, you know, hashing out these problems. But of course, that story doesn't get told, right? I mean, you might think that it's improvement to say, oh, let's get a few press releases out there. So just something to think about as to how we go about kind of equalizing that narrative, because, you know, we're the agency, we're the city. And I think that, you know, were it up to me, I would prefer anyone on our staff, and that includes our city council, you know, for that matter, you know, start writing about the experiences, the story of how we got to ultimately a bird safe and dark skies ordinance, for instance. I mean, that took a number of iterations, a lot of different, you know, collaborations within the community, and that story simply doesn't get told. You know, any given one of these things, you know, you have so many different ideas and different nuances that just don't get reflected, and ultimately it becomes a narrative that's spun, you know, largely in, you know, rather hyperbolic and inaccurate fashion. So, you know, ultimately, I think that's a remedy. It also helps to hone writing skills and evaluative skills. So I would really, you know, I don't think it's necessarily, you know, an absolute endpoint, but if you're working on an item and you can kind of think about it from a narrative perspective, you know, and appreciate the various interactions that go into the final product, I think there's going to be a remedy for a lot of, you know, various things that are out there that perhaps feel a bit unsavory. You know, this will help us engage more in the process of how we interact with each other, which ultimately is what we're all about. We're all about that as not just a community, but as a society. And, you know, if we don't have that reflection, that ability to, you know, to engage and interact in a way where we're looking at this kind of in retrospect, then ultimately, you know, a lot of things get lost. So, you know, I think that's how we start to take the narrative back. I think that's how we really start to communicate what Cupertino has done, how it's been doing, rather than, you know, creating a very large gap for, you know, frankly, opportunism to fill for us. So, you know, I'll try to lead by example, you know, maybe pick an issue and, you know, share some thoughts on it, you know, for the next time we meet. But, you know, in any event, I thank staff for its very good work bringing forward a complete suite. We have been slammed for getting done as late as midnight. I guess people are going to complain no matter what, even though last year we were getting done at 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning. I suppose if I could create a time machine and start the meeting at 6:45 and end it at 6:30, people will probably still complain that we're not getting done 15 minutes earlier. But in any event, I really appreciate everyone's you know, willingness to have these discussions and cohesive, honest dialogues. I don't see any other hands raised from council at this point. So let me close out item number 18 by giving a bit of a preview in a month or so, as well as an advance thank you. Interim City Manager Larson, presumably you'll still be here to provide our first quarter update. And I'm not out of school, I don't think, if I say that even though the city manager search is a personnel-driven confidential process, City Council will be meeting a week from today in closed session on our litigation update. At the very beginning, we will be receiving an update on the city manager search from Avery and Associates insofar as the recruitment. The brochure went out for applications. We received a very healthy number of applications. And so we'll be, as a council, receiving an update on how that's going. So given that timeline, I expect that we'll be using well our services of our interim city manager for a good month or several, even going forward. So looking forward to getting that first quarter work plan update. And I see it as really our true first quarter work plan update, because of course last year was rather unusual. We had COVID collectively, and this year's not really completely out of the woods insofar as that goes, but at least our processes have, you know, had that opportunity to coalesce, you know, under multiple city managers, but we've managed to do it in a very successful fashion, I feel. So without further ado, let me go on to the cleanup items at the end of our agenda. After item number 18, we have any updates from the city staff first on comments. Interim City Manager Larson, do you have any staff comments at this time?
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, very good. And council comments and future agenda items. I see Councilmember Moore followed by Councilmember Willie with hands up. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. I'm hoping that we could have some kind of a study session perhaps on SB 9 and 10 to understand their impact and if there's something that some ordinance that we might want to enact regarding their application in the city. I don't know if the city attorney wants to say anything on that, if there's anything we can do, and then whether or not anyone supports that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore. I don't think that it would be surprising if staff had already teed that up, at least insofar as one of the new ordinances concerned, one of the new pieces of legislation is concerned, where the city has a bit more flexibility. I think that was SB 9, but please feel free to correct me. Can anyone from staff speak to that? Are we teeing that up, or are we awaiting direction from council to place that on our agenda in the near future?
So, we are moving forward with an analysis, particularly of SB 9. You'll be receiving a legal analysis of that. It will, it likely be in the form of a confidential memo, but something that I expect we'll be discussing at council at some point. We're also, I'll be getting input from other staff this week, and then we'll be able to move forward with that. And I would suggest that that council review the council confidential memo, and then we can decide the best direction to proceed, whether that is a study section or something more direct towards a legislative process.
Okay. Well, I mean, not to bring anything to the forefront that exposes us legally, but this is legislation that affects every city and town in the state. So are we able to kind of get a sense of where other jurisdictions are going? Because, it seems embedded in the legislation itself. It's almost an invitation to, to look at one's internal ordinance. So do you have an intuitive sense of, where, I guess my basic question is, if you're invited to do something, it shouldn't be surprising, right? I mean, I'm not trying to challenge your characterization of this as, being something that's needing to be discussed confidentially, but City Attorney Jensen, is there anything in particular that seems, fairly straightforward in terms of what most jurisdictions will likely do?
Well, so the one thing that I think is relatively straightforward, if council wishes to consider it, is it came up in the study session this morning, is to consider legislation that limits the applicability of state ADU law on parcels where there has been both a lot split and an approval of a duplex under the ministerial approval provisions of SB 9, because that's an area where there is a carve out for local control, but I believe it will require affirmative legislation by the city to take advantage of that carve out. So that seems to be a pretty straightforward, straightforward action for the city to take if that is the policy direction that council wishes to go. There may be other issues as well. I mean, part of it is that this is still, new and percolating among, the community of city and city attorneys, and it's always, the more people that are thinking about this, the better, I think, as far as sort of improving your, identifying issues and concerns. But that's one obvious concern, that one obvious potential area for legislation that jumped out at me immediately.
Yeah, no, I think
if I could jump in.
Just, trying to be open and in good faith. And, we're always adherent to the idea of preserving public safety and making sure that our infrastructure is sufficient, which of course is what a large part of what makes us a successful jurisdiction. Interim City Manager Larson, you had a comment that you wanted to make?
Yes, it was more to the suggestion of a study session. I actually think both your city attorney and I are feeling a lot of need to move quickly on some of the SB 9 items and finishing the legal analysis for the council that your attorney's working on will be critically helpful for your staff as well to identify what are the opportunities to move ahead. And I think what we'd be wanting to look for, Mr. Mayor, is the quickest way to do that. So it's not scheduling a study session for November where we've already missed the window to have ordinance changes in effect by January 1. You know, so I think we are going to have to find ways to be nimble in a few critical areas. But until the analysis is done and that's provided to council by your attorney, I don't think we can go much further than that without having that information. So, but I think what you brought up earlier.
Sure. You know, we have League of California Cities later this week. We have closed session next Tuesday. A week after that is our next council meeting, I believe. And so, you know, there are opportunities out there, and I'm really glad that we have that energy and willingness to move forward. Okay, so our next council member comments and future agenda items are from Councilmember Willie and Councilmember Vice Mayor Chow. Councilmember Willie.
Yeah, so future agenda items, as I mentioned after the public comment at the beginning. So I'd like to propose that we do bring a agenda item for the safe storage of firearms. And it's not like we're going to be charting a new territory. I think we should be leveraging the other communities that the residents have alerted us to. I think they said there's 13 of them that have. So hopefully I'll get some support from another councilman to have this as a future agenda item.
You know, let me jump in and ask you a question, Councilmember Willie. Would you be willing to, since our work plan is so full, would you be willing to put that on our agenda to make sure that we have it as a complete work plan item in our next fiscal year? Or is your first preference to try to get it on there, since you know we are in our third month of the current fiscal year, and I wouldn't say that we're necessarily 25% of the way through our work plan. So just something to consider, because this particular item will take some staff resources. It will take you know, perhaps some political capital. And so I just want to be respectful of the work that we've done and the expectations of the public for the work that we've put out there, and you know what is effectively, you know, some commitments, you know, to what we're going to be working on between now and the end of June.
Yeah, I definitely agree with some of the important ones like you just brought up, SB 9 and 10. I would like to not necessarily say that don't worry about it until the next fiscal year work plan. I'd like to be able to tell the residents that have this concern that we're going to bring it as a agenda item as soon as we could put it in, realizing that we have such a full schedule for the near-term future. I'd really like to use that verbiage and then give the city manager a chance to evaluate how much time. Like I say, I don't feel we're charting new territory. 9 communities already have. If city staff were to put those in a table, and if they all lined up exactly the same, I would say that, gee whiz, it should be pretty easy to add us to the list. If, on the other hand, it's like 5G and they're all over the map, then I think, yeah, then it's gonna. But let's find out the level of effort from the city manager, and that's my comment.
Okay, if you're willing to provide that flexibility, then I'll go over it with the interim city manager to get a sense of whether it makes sense or it can fit into our current fiscal year. And if you're willing to provide that flexibility, I'm happy to report back in our next meeting, or possibly bring it back earlier rather than in the next fiscal year. But Interim City Manager Larson, did you have any comment on this? Because you and I had actually talked about this right earlier today, even in terms of take.
Two things. One, I actually think when you meet with the city attorney and I tomorrow, we can talk about it, because I think there will be a large part of the heavy lift will be from the city attorney's office. And then I think the mayor, the issue you brought up, the political capital, it's been my experience, these issues will take a substantial amount of council discourse with the public, and scheduling that as a complete item once rather than multiple times is usually the best way to handle it, to make sure the public all comes, has their voice, and then the council decides what they think is best for the community, instead of once a month for 3 months having that dynamic.
Yeah, so we can figure it out in a thoughtful, measured way. So thanks for the suggestion, Councilmember Willie. Next we have Vice Mayor Chow.
Yeah, I would really suggest that this should be considered prioritized together with next year's work program items. Since this is not in addition to something we're already doing, it's just a completely new item. We will need public input. Some public might not like the idea, because you are restricting what they are doing. It's kind of like vaccine mandate. Seems to be a good idea, something we should all do. But when you are enforcing it so that everyone has to do it, some people will probably object to that. And I know people who object to that. So this is not a cut and dry issue. That do we have time this year when we should focus on housing element? I think we should not start another fight this year. This takes political capital, like Darcy said, because this is not a cut and dry issue. And there is a group that has been advocating this for years. And I know whoever has little children, they
Vice Mayor
should
Chow,
be responsible for
I
themselves.
was happy to let you share your initial procedural thoughts, but let's not get into.
Yeah, okay. So for agenda item SB 9, when I hope to get evaluation of, because all our standards are for discretionary approval. Like the parking lots for one single family home is now two in garage and two on site, but not in garage. Now, when it's lot split, what does that mean? I don't know. I couldn't figure out from reading the bill. And then also the safety screening, privacy screening. I think we didn't have this duplex in mind when we designed all that. And so those probably we need to revisit some of those standards that was meant for single family home, and now they would apply for duplex. So and then in terms of parking requirements, if they are on-street parking, then one street could be probably easily full. Could we continue to allow lost bridge? Would that create traffic problem? Could we add standards so that this could be strict objective standard controlled? Could we add objective standard to evaluate this traffic issue, so that it's not discretionary, but then there is a standard to follow? So that's something I hope to understand from the study.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor Chow, and staff, particularly our interim city manager and city attorney. Do you feel like you have clarity from Vice Mayor Chow's comments on the follow on the SB 9 item? Okay, I'll take that as a yes, and hopefully, the absorption.
Two other things. So one thing is, I think I like Council Member Way's idea that hotline is added to the ID. I think we have senior center who have membership card, maybe we can consider adding hotline to the membership card or sports center membership card, because like Councilmember Moore said, middle-aged man is actually high risk. I actually read that white male is like 3 times higher risk for suicide. So maybe sports center could also consider. So another thing is that one of the public comment was about the noise level ordinance. So it seems the residents did quite some study to compare with other cities. I wish we could study that, but this year we are pretty full, so I'm unsure, but at least if not this year, next year we should examine our noise ordinance.
Yeah, that's on the radar as well, and in fact, that's slightly developed, but I think the point's well taken. It also is not on our work plan, and if it can potentially, wait until the next fiscal year as we're developing the current work plan, this is a great running list of items.
Can we create that list so I don't have to remember it?
Yeah, we should do that. Yeah, so we do that as a follow-up. Okay. Interim City Manager Larson, did you have anything to say about the suggestion for the noise ordinance? I know that we had talked about it.
We'll just create a next up list of issues to tee up for the next round of priority setting.
Yeah, I mean, the TBD list, the to be determined list, I think, yeah, probably could just be winnowed out into a potential future work plan, upcoming work plan, list of items. Okay, so
Great.
I don't see further hands up. And so I guess that takes us to the end of our meeting. And it is sort of 11 p.m. All right, pat on our collective backs, and thank you very much. Let's go ahead and adjourn this meeting until October 5th. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you on October 5th, and the meeting is adjourned.
Great.
All right.